Hey,
What's
how are
up?
you?
I'm hanging out. I'm down in
Greetings from
my
Texas.
down in my lovely basement in frigid upstate New York. It's currently sunny and snowing. It's really awesome. But
It's
yeah,
81 today,
asshole.
Fahrenheit.
Sorry, a little cough there. But yeah, here we are. First episode of the Punk Rock Drummers podcast. And it
Yeah,
was a
buddy.
trip too. It was a trip. Dave Mello. I don't know how we landed that. That was a Hail Mary Facebook message that led to this episode. But what a sweetheart. Very open book. Like
Yeah,
it was
man, what a
cool.
guy. He was
Yeah.
awesome. Very cool to talk to. Easy to talk to. He gave a lot of really cool information, and it
You
was
know,
good.
for,
Good show.
yeah, for me personally, I mean, he was a very influential drummer. So what a privilege it was to be able to ask someone questions I've been literally wanting to ask since I was probably 12, 13 years old. So it was sick, dude. Yeah, and
For sure, man.
yeah, and I hope everyone is ready to maybe giggle a little bit or
I know
not.
I am.
Oh God, dude. I I'm definitely like a little just give us a couple episodes, smooth out some wrinkles, right?
Yeah, man.
I
We're
think
getting old too. We got wrinkles.
yeah, I think if anything, these first three, I think you'll notice a drastic improvement of the audio quality, at least on my end, at a certain point. But this is aside, I think it's going to be sick. I
We'll
hope you
get you
all
some
enjoy
better
it.
mics. We'll get
Yeah,
you some
there.
better stuff, Christian.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I hope you all. Why am I looking at the microphone?
Yeah.
Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy the episode, and there you go.
And we have a sponsor, right?
Oh yes, we do. We have a sponsor. Um, Rhythm and
Rhythm and
Roast.
Roast.
Rhythm
Sorry,
and
we said it at
Roast
the same
Coffee.
time.
Oh, should we do it? Let's try it again. One,
One,
two,
two, three. Rhythm
rhythm
and Roast.
you didn't tell me you were gonna sing it, dude. How about we just do this? Rhythm
Rhythm
and
and Roast.
oh my
Oh,
God.
do it again. Do it again. Do it again.
They're like, never mind. We're gonna pull our sponsorship.
Yeah.
Rhythm and
Roast.
goes in your mouth. What? It's
That should be
coffee.
their slogan.
You drink it, right? And I have a little bag of a bold baseline right here. Should I shake it and just
Yeah.
everyone loves that. But yeah, if you hop on their website, you can get 10% off a bag of coffee with the code Punk Rock Drummers. That being said, let's roll into the episode.
Let's do it.
Yeah, buddy.
Hi, how are you?
All right, how you guys doing?
Wonderful.
We're
We're
doing
very,
well.
very excited.
So I'm Christian, and that's Matt.
Yes.
I know we spoke here and there, but I figured we'd get the
Right.
introductions properly.
Yeah, you don't know me yet.
All right.
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Sorry, I think the email got sent to my junk mail, so I had to go through and find it.
That's all right.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, dude-
I think things like Gmail these days, because that used to happen to me too. Anything with Hotmail would get sent right to junk, and
Yeah.
it was a nightmare.
Well, I appreciate you hopping on a little early also for
Right.
rescheduling too, man. That flu was brutal. I'm still not completely over it. So I have my my mixer here, and I got my channel ready to go to mute. So if I start coughing while someone's talking, the camera won't cut over to me. So yeah, it's been brutal, man. You've been healthy?
Yeah, I've been good.
Good.
Thank you.
Good to hear. So you want to get right into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to start with what was the first kit you owned? You remember?
Yeah, my first kit I got from my uncle, who was a jazz drummer in the military. Gave me it was like a 50s, early 50s sonar set. And it was pretty cool. It was just all kind of rusted out and stuff. And I was able to go to this drum store that we had back in the 80s, early 80s, called Leo's Drums, and I traded it in for a Rogers. It was like a Rogers, had two bass drums and 2 floor toms, 2 rack toms, and it was pretty cool because the sonar kit was so kind of worn out, and I had really bad cymbals, and I was, just because it was old and kind of collectible, I was able to trade it in for a pretty large set and cymbals and everything. That was like 1980, 1982.
Was that the kit that we ended up eventually seeing in Op Ivy, the
Yeah,
Rogers?
that was my first kit, and it had 2 bass drums, which was cool because I've never played double bass drum, but I was able to switch out the bass drums when one kind of broke and it was a little bit fucked up. I just got to put it in there.
Awesome. So how long you'd been playing before Operation Ivy started, or were there any bands before then? Or
Yeah, I played in a few punk bands. I started playing like in 1982 when I was 13, and just kind of jamming with friends. I went through band, as a kid, but I like grew up playing the clarinet, and through band, and I got into like rock music. And when I was, I think it's when you're 13, that's when like music kind of opens up to you as a kid. You're 13 years old and things you hear just kind of change you. And when I was 13, I was just like, heard like, the Ramones and Clash for the first time. I actually went and saw the Who and Clash in Oakland. It was like a Down to Green, and that like I just wanted to be a drummer after seeing that, and I just wanted to play music. And a lot of my friends were already playing. Most of my friends were playing guitar and bass, and there was definitely a shortage of drummers. So I just sort of picked the drums, and I was really into the Who. So like I went to their back catalog and I was like checking out Keith Moon, and he like became my favorite drummer. And when I was 13, awesome. And that's why I wanted to start playing the drums.
Is that what influenced the desire for the big kit too? Or didn't he play a pretty big kit?
It was kind of a big kit. And then, as I got older, after I left, after Operation Ivy and I was in Schlong, I got even a bigger kit, and with a 24-inch bass drum. It was a Tama Art Star, and with rosewood shells and stuff. It was really cool. It was big. But then later on, I started to totally condense, and now I play like a 4-piece set. And but yeah, Keith Moon, he was just a crazy style of drumming, and just that wild sort of antics, and the way he played kind of inspired me. Not so much the big drums, because in the 80s everybody had big drums.
That's true.
So, I got the drums because it was a good deal, and they just happened to be a lot of drums. But it wasn't necessarily the big drums that I was going after. I was just going after playing wild and sort of that crazy manic style that Keith Moon sort of showed me. And when I started getting into punk, the punk rock drummers that just drum really fast, and it was more of a sport than, actually music. And I was like an athletic event, and that totally drew me in. And, I kind of based my further playing on just, trying to last a full set of just going crazy and sweating and just getting all my energy out, on the kit. Because in real, and I kind of got a reputation of just being sort of a crazy drummer who makes a lot of faces and does, silly antics on stage. But in real life, I'm like exact opposite. I'm a pretty quiet guy, and I'm a huge music fan. So, and a huge, punk rock, hardcore fan. So that made me want to just to be that way up on stage,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm discovering that we're very similar. I discovered a lot of the bands I love at 13. Of course, it was completely different bands than you. It was like Green Day and Rancid and Operation Ivy. You know,
Right.
it's like come full
Right.
circle. But you know, same thing. You know, I would go to concerts and I would get so inspired, and I just like I have to do this. And then you know, like everything you're saying, and I'm kind of quiet off stage, but when I play, I'm going nuts, you know.
Yeah,
It's funny
exactly.
how that happens. There's a lot of drummers just like that. It's so great to hear that I'm not crazy or anything.
Yeah.
I'm actually like a loud asshole in real life, and when I play drum, I barely move at all. The exact opposite. So
That would be
so
really funny.
I've been trying to conserve my energy a little bit, but it's hard. But so jumping, I don't know, kind of hop around here, but jumping a little bit forward to Op Ivy. It's funny is listening back to it now, I'm starting to notice that there was a little bit more of a like a reggae feel to the drums than there was like the actual ska. In fact, I don't think, if I remember correctly, you don't play that stereotypical beat really at all during Op Ivy, which was interesting.
Well, I mean, I think the more reggae stuff came from me and Matt sort of jamming during a show when Tim would break his strings and we would just go into to a reggae kind of drum and bass, just kind of breaking it down. And I would do like, slow 4/4, just like and we would kind of just do that dub stuff. I mean, I was very much into reggae, and I remember me and Matt talking like we wanted to kind of like hook up and get tight, sort of like Sly and Robbie, who's like a dub, dub duo, and so we would do that, and then on stage we would just kind of get that, and while Tim is tuning up or fixing a string, and then kind of Jesse would just improv, and we would call it like toasting, where he would just sort of like, just start doing that. And we kind of had that kind of groove going, but we did play a lot of ska. I mean, from the get go, and it was fast, but the ska beats, and Matt taught me how to play ska was, you always play to the bass, right? Because the bass is keeping time, and it's pushing everything forward. So when in a ska based line, it's always walking. It's like do doom 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 doom, and it's hitting that. So when they kind of like was like, well, this is how we want you to play drums. We want you to just push that bass and keep it going. So that's why, in like a lot of those fast songs, like Yelling in My Ear or Sound System or those kind of songs, you'll hear that my bass drum is always just, on the 1, 2, 3, and 4, just like pushing it, do, 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 do. And I never stop, because that keeps it going. There's no, like a lot of punk ska, it ended up, getting a little bit faster, and they would go to the 2/4. It's like doom da da doom da da doom da da doom, but on Op Ivy it was always kind of the same. It was always just a 4/4. So it's sort of in between. It wasn't as fast as some of the fast punk ska bands that came after us. Sort of like got it really fast, but it wasn't as slow as like that second wave of two-tone bands, right, like Specials and English Beat, who were they did the same sort of rhythm, but it was somewhere in between, and I think it kind of gave me a style where it's like the bass drum's always pounding away, and then that's gives you a really easy platform to put in those fast rolls while your bass drum is still keeping everything going, and so there's no choppiness, there's no like choppiness in between. It just sort of flows. And I think I kind of had that style in Operation Ivy, and it's been quoted before. This I'm just straightforward, kind of not sloppy, but loose, kind of that loose feeling. So it just like it's in a ways it kind of gave me a template to sort of be a little bit jazzy and as I'm going forward, because those little accents that you can put on your hi-hat and go while you're playing this beat, on the and the when you're going boom, that kind of those little tiny accents, you hear it because the bass is very jazzy. The bass is playing a jazz walking bass line, and it could be really fast. Even like some of our fast, punk songs where Matt's just walking up and down, and you hear it, it's just a really fast walking bass line, like Bombshell or Hoboken, where and I'm just playing really fast 2/4, but at the same time, it kind of sounds jazzy because the bass is playing a jazz line. It's going do 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 do, and I'm going do da do da do da do ba do ba do that, and so it kind of has those little tiny jazz things in between, and it's not like it's not hard bass drums to play at all, but it like the bass and the drums just carry that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're playing what the music is calling for, which is like
exactly.
a pretty strong trait for a lot of drummers. And I actually had in my notes written here that at the time listening to it always sounded very bass driven. And I just wonder if it was recorded in a bit more of like a modern time where more focus could have been put into like making the drums a little like fatter sounding. I think it probably would have ended up sounding more drum driven than bass, but I just think Matt's tone was so like right in the front through a lot of that
right.
The drums kind of push back a little bit.
Yeah, and in our recordings, I think this was like I was 18 years old, 18, 19 when all this was going on, right? And my first experience of actually going into a studio, but they were cheaper studios that we recorded, and we kind of did everything so fast. Like that, our first 7-inch, we did in like 4 hours, went in there and recorded everything. And the vocals all in 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours.
Do you remember what songs those were?
Yeah, that was our hectic 7-inch.
Okay.
That was like Junkies Running Dry, Here We Go Again, all those songs, which on the Operation Ivy CD, that's at the end of the CD,
yep.
Right? First starts with Energy. And even Energy, when we went in, we were trying to record it in a warehouse with one of our friends who had this idea to try to get a better sound. And he had us record, and it was just kind of an empty warehouse sound. And then he was wanting us to overdub, like he wanted me to overdub the drums over this sound. And it just wasn't working out. He had me in a bathroom playing a snare drum, trying to hit my snares over, and it wasn't working out.
That's awkward.
We were like, we knew the song so well. We were like, we just want to go back into a studio and just record everything live, and that's how we were able to do that. And we did that Energy. We recorded all the guitar, all the main tracks. I think we took 2-3 takes on each song. And we did it all in like 9 hours, like everything except for the vocals, And
so that last time that we spoke, you had mentioned, if I remember correctly, that the original name wasn't Energy. Was that true or no?
No, it was Energy.
It was Energy.
Yeah, the 7-inch was Hectic, and then I think we came up with the name like right before it was released.
Okay.
Like. Jesse is notorious for changing things, having the artwork done at the very last minute, having all the songs, even lyrics as he was changing lyrics as he's recording, and just, trying to squeeze in extra syllables. I
was only asking, I was curious if the name came from like that shift of trying it one way and not getting the right energy and then doing it again and capturing it the right way, if the name was inspired by.
I think, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to ask, I feel like, we kind of, that was Energy came, not really the recording, But when we would play live, and how we thought, we had a lot of energy live, and also we portrayed a lot of energy. And, I feel like sometimes I think Jesse put me on the back of the cover where you see like my dreads and stuff.
Yep.
Because he felt, that picture was, was a lot of energy. And I kind of portrayed that when we play,
An iconic shot. I love that. I love that one, man. That was awesome. What was the writing process? Did you guys generally just do it together in a room, or?
But generally, yeah, we did it we had a practice space, and generally Tim has an idea, has riffs, and we get together and we just sort of build a song, and Jesse ideas flow, and he's always changing the lyrics around until it kind of happens. A lot of those songs on Energy, some of them just came at right before we went in the studio. We had a bunch of songs, and then like Tim went like, "Oh, I have this song," and then we would just go in, practice it once, and then we would go to the studio and we recorded those. So like songs like Bank Shot, I think he wrote that like right before we went in, and he wrote Vulnerability, which was just a riff, right before we went in. And other songs, we went on tour before we started this record, and a lot of the songs were like building, like kind of getting written while we were on the road, like Unity and Freeze Up. Those songs, a lot of the ska songs, actually, we started writing more as we were on the road.
I was curious about the writing process. You were talking earlier about how you would noodle during string changes and stuff like that. And I know, being in bands myself, sometimes songs get written during those times, even practice or whatever. But I mean, shows, I can imagine maybe not as much, but you said you tend to do that, quite often, and you'd play those ska beats and everything. So did any of the songs get written during those little noodling sessions?
I feel they did. I can't really say for sure, but I feel like Unity was one that we kind of had that groove going, and it was, I mean, a lot of basic chord progressions are very simple. They're always repeated, so there's a lot of, but jamming, me and Matt, we could just get into a good groove, and then if it's something that was stuck, Tim would pick that up and he would start playing the progression, and then it would eventually, he could turn that into a song, because, a catchy line would just pop in his head, and he would go, this is a song. And me and Matt, because he started playing that same progression, we'd go, okay, we can play what we were, this jam that just sort of stuck because it was catchy and we remembered it. Right. That's how songs are kind of written, right? You can play the riff. I mean, I play guitar too, so I know it's like you're playing a guitar and you're playing a riff, and you have all these great ideas. The next day, I have this good song, and you're like, I can't remember that. It's the ones that you remember that come back to you. Those are the ones that make the song, because most of the times you have a million ideas. 80% are going to be bad ideas, and those are the ones you don't remember. The 20% are the ones that stick in your memory, and those become good songs.
Yeah, and back then maybe of course it wasn't as easy to record something that you had in your brain.
Yeah, not at all.
So it's not like today where you have a cell phone, you can just turn it on, record something, and have it in your head. But that's such a good way to know what's going to work or what isn't. That's a really cool way of thinking. I never would have thought of it like that.
It's funny too to think that now, if you played a show and the guitar player didn't have just another guitar ready to go when a string broke, it's like it's like unheard of now. You know what I mean? Everyone's got like an extra snare and all this other gear. So
I know. It's so different back then. I mean, just the basic things, touring and all that stuff is so different then than it is now. And just, how everything's so instant, like you say, recording, if you have an idea, I don't even really think about that. I know I have my phone and I'm writing stuff, but I always forget because, I grew up in a different age, and I forget to have the help of these new inventions and new things that actually make your life easier. It's like I totally forget all about that. But
Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
the same way.
I was we were lucky growing up. So I was a lot younger than all my friends and everyone I played with. So I used to have to wait outside. Someone from the club would bring me up through the back door to my drums, and as soon as we were done, it was carried right back out, put back in the car. But I remember we were like really, we'd do practice, and after we kind of get something together, it was like the Maxell cassette on the boombox, and you just try to find the right place in the room to put it in where the cymbals didn't just wash everything out, and like everyone going back and trying to like pick it, but as you dubbed
Yep.
it for each member, the quality got worse and worse until it was eventually just hissing, and you're kind of left with nothing too. So I think I probably caught like the very tail end of that era. And you're right, there's something special about it, and it's really interesting the way you put that. I never thought of it as like at that point it was almost like the stuff that was meant to stick is the stuff that stuck because that's the things that you remembered, and there was no like that kind of half-ass thrown together thing just kind of falls away because it wasn't it wasn't as memorable. It's actually super interesting. I never thought of it
Yeah.
that way.
And I feel like you probably back then you had to work harder for those. So you're practicing, you're working hard because you don't have the. I mean, even with a boom box, we would record stuff. Like you said, you had to put it in the right place. Like sometimes, we'd put it in the next room and then put all the guitar amps close to the door so that it would get the guitar amp, and then the drums would be way in the back. So, and it was always, you never quite got that. So it was more practicing the practice, and you practice till it sounded good to you because you knew. And so then when you came in, for the next practice, if you forgot something, then maybe that wasn't good, and that's my point. Maybe it didn't stick. The things that stick, like you said, was the things that was good. And you kind of had to work. I mean, working hard was part of it. It was fun. We didn't have, computers. We, I think nowadays kids, they go in their room and they're with a computer and instant gratification, and they can do most of the music all by themselves, and it was more of, we were doing this to be with, even before Op Ivy and I was playing in bands, it was something that everyone in my neighborhood did. We did this as more of a social, being with friends and seeing how things worked
Yep.
out, and being able to, hook up and connect. It was definitely a more of a social thing than anything else. It was like, being with your friends and playing games or playing sports, just like that. Like people like to, go play basketball. Well, all we did was want to play music,
Yep.
I feel
And,
lucky, I'm almost 45, so I got to experience that to a certain degree, high speed
Right.
dubbing tapes of your album at Walmart, at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
To sell at a show the next day. Like, I'm old enough to have done stuff like that. And I'm very, very lucky that I was born in 1980. That way I could experience that part of it. And then also as an adult, I can have some of the finer things technology offers.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I wish I was more technology inclined, but
Same.
try to use it to my benefit, but it always feel like I'm behind the younger generations, and how they can just adapt so easy because they're born into it, and we didn't hardly have computers when I was a kid, I mean, it was just kind of starting. Personal computers was just kind of starting. I was already in my, mid-20s when when there was actual internet. So I didn't even realize, like it was very late. I didn't take any computer classes in school. We didn't even have computer classes. So it was
Right.
typing. It was typing. That was what we had.
It's not like the computer could really help you that much musically, you know,
Right. Well, now it helps
writing lyrics.
quite a lot. Yeah, yeah. Helps my son quite a lot. He stays in his room and just, he has FL Studios, and he's like a master of of doing that. So, we didn't have those kind of programs, you
No.
had to do it yourself.
I had
Right.
one friend that had an 8 track, like a tape deck 8 track, and we could not figure that thing out. So we'd record, and like everything would always be like 2 beats behind where it was supposed to be, and it was just like this acid trip of a mess. It was never quite
Right.
right. But I wanted to ask, was there any inkling to you guys, or maybe just you in that moment of playing that you kind of had? Like, were you aware that there was a bit of like a lightning in the bottle thing happening
Uh,
during the time, or?
well, for me, I was just stoked to be playing with Matt and Tim because they were like 3 or 4 years, or are 3 or 4 years older than me, and had been playing in a pretty successful, high school band called Basic Radio before Operation Ivy, and they actually were playing shows. They were way more of an actual ska band. Ska, they played some punk and some poppies kind of stuff, but they were, they played a lot more shows. And so when I think Tim, asked me to play, I was just totally stoked. And, I definitely felt like there was some sort of connection when we all got together and started to play. It was definitely like we gelled very well. And, you know, we kind of were lucky, and we got lucky, but we were in the right place at the right time with the Gilman Street scene just kind of starting up right as we started the band, and a bunch of other young bands all starting, talking, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids all had a place to play. And I felt, we had all of a sudden, after a month of practicing, we just started getting shows. And while playing with all these bands, I felt like, okay, this is something that, this is a good feeling, because there was a lot of bands and people really reacted to us well. We got a lot of thumbs up, and this is exciting when we played. I mean, I think our first show at Gilman Street, people were already up on stage singing along with us, and a couple easy songs that we had. And it was, we played like our first show in my garage, and then the next day we played our second show at Gilman Street. And that's when, it just started happening. We met a lot of, great friends, and were able to get, because of Matt and Tim's, past bands, we were able to get, more connections that way. And it just started going really fast. But it wasn't till after the tour, we came back from our first tour, that, it just, all of a sudden, shows were sold out and there was a lot of people. And I felt, oh my God, this is going to be something big. Then I was just going along with, playing in a band, being a kid playing in a band, and just, having fun and being able to see a bunch of places I'd never seen, and play shows every night. And, that was just excitement. But when we got back from the tour, then all of a sudden, we were playing to sold out people and sold out shows, and tons of kids were, all into it. And that's when, things kind of got a little bit too big for us, because we were young. And so I think that, and then the album came out, and it was just, yeah, like you said, it was a genie in a bottle. And when it exploded, it was just a little bit too much to handle, because it was a little bit too big, and we weren't ready for it. We had a bunch of punk ethics that were, and we were still growing up. We were still kids, dude. And we were like, well, how do we want to be? What do we want to be? Do we want to be rock stars? That's not why we're doing it. And we don't want to be like that. And so it was just a little bit too much for us to handle. And I think,
Yeah, I can
and
imagine. Was the popularity mostly around the Bay Area, or were you spreading out? I don't know exactly where you toured. Did you just stay in the States, or did you go into
yeah,
other countries?
no, it was just in the States, and we were about to go to Europe, Lookout had a whole European tour booked. We were about to go to Europe, and that's right when we broke up. But right before we were, which, I mean, I was bummed. I definitely didn't want to break up. And I don't think, Matt and Tim wanted to either, but it, it was just too much to handle. And so, it was just one of those things. I think, who knows what could have happened, but at the same time we played all over the country. It was only a 6-week tour, but still it was a lot of places, and we played with a lot of big bands like Fugazi and Guar and Screeching Weasel and Zero Boys and stuff, bands like that. And it was fun. And when we got back, but not that the shows were, that there was maybe 6 or 7 really big shows on that tour. A lot of the tour was, very small shows. But when we got back, we were like the first band of those new Gilman Street bands that were all playing. We were the first one to actually go on tour. And so it was a big deal, I mean, I wasn't even old enough to drink. So it's
Yeah.
we went in we went in a car with a box on top, and we just drove around. And when we got back, it was the word kind of spread or something, because all our shows were a lot bigger when we got back.
Crazy. It seems like you guys almost lived and experienced more in those, what was it, 87 to 89?
Yeah.
In that time, it feels like you guys did more than most bands do in 20 years. I mean, maybe, not trying to blow you up here, but I mean, I grew up playing along to those records. I learned how to play to that and some the Crimpshine and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And it just, it's hard to believe that all of that, from the outsider's perspective, back then, there's no internet to find this stuff out. If you had told me all that happened in 2 years, there's no way. There's no way that many songs were written, that, you know what I mean? That it seems like you guys accomplished a lifetime, a whole career's worth of music in 2 short years, which, I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. And I hope you guys all give yourself the flowers you deserve for that, man. It's a huge thing.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing about it was, I think that's, why we were just, wanted to do this and yearning to play every day. So it was like a thing where it wasn't just, we're going to be in a band and we're going to play shows and see if we can make a record and do this. It was almost like, okay, this is a way of life. I want you to be in the band, but this is a way of life. So we would hang out all the time. We were good friends. I remember, me and Tim and Jesse and Matt, we would go in the car, go up to Telegraph, and it was a whole, we would make stickers, and we'd call it doughing. We put stickers on people's backs, put them on everywhere we can. We'd get flyers. We were handing flyers out. It was a whole thing. It wasn't just okay, we're going to practice once a week and then we're going to try to get shows. It was okay, now we're in a punk band, so we need to be punks and we need to be friends, and we're going to live this. And so it was a way of life. We went out of town on the weekend, sometimes up to Chico or down to LA, or these really short, kind of trips. And we did this, we would go with Crimpshine, or we'd go with some of these bands that are in the scene. And we would do this constantly. So when we started in the, spring of 87, that summer of 87 was all we did was Op Ivy, all we did. And we just did it. And so that's why we got so tight, because we were constantly, that was my life. I was in the band. And I was trying to go to community college, for the fall of 87. And I did for a while, but there was just so much. It was like being in Op Ivy wasn't a job, but it was, was my life. It was too much of my time. So I dropped out of school and went on tour. And
how old were you at the time?
I was 18, 19, I started when I was 18, and then when we broke up, I was 20. So
Jesus,
Still
that's
too young to drink.
crazy.
yeah,
I wanted to
exactly.
ask you, how were you discovered? How were you asked to be in the band? What were you doing at the time whenever
Yeah.
they found you?
So I was in a band with my brother, who's a couple years younger than me, high school band called Distorted Truth. And we wanted to be a punk band, play everywhere. And we tried to, there was no place for us to play. So I started putting on shows in my garage, right? And and we would do things like we'd go to these school yards that had like electricity and plug into school and tell people to come, and then we'd play for 4 or 5 songs before the cops come, and then it was broken up. But my mom was like, you can have shows here as long as people don't bring alcohol. So my band, we put on these shows in my garage, a couple shows, and I met Aaron Comet Bus from Crimp Shrine, and he was always like very going around seeing what bands are around the area. There's like a lot of, smaller towns outside of Berkeley. There's Albany, El Cerrito, all the East Bay is, a lot of little towns all just put together, right?
Well, he was writing a zine back then too, I think, right?
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
writing a zine, and he was also putting together these compilation tapes, right?
Hmm.
Where he'd get like all the bands, anybody in a band, he would try to get them to give him, whatever they could. And we like recorded a couple Distorted Truth. We recorded a couple songs on our boombox, right? And he put it on a compilation tape, and so I wanted to put on shows. So I got like Crimp Shrine and this band Soup, and to play in my garage for our first show, and it went over really well. Just packed a bunch of kids in this small little garage, and we had a garage show. And so the second show that I put on, Basic Radio wanted to play because Aaron said, well, Basic Radio. And I already knew Basic Radio as they were an Albany High band. I'm from Albany High. And they were Albany High band as well. And they'd played like talent shows and stuff. So I was like, yeah, let's get Basic Radio to play. So my band, Distorted Truth, Basic Radio played, Crimp Shrine played, and Soup played again. And at this show, Tim and Matt, they saw me play drums for the band. And I think that's when they got in their idea, because they came to the singer from Distorted Truth, and they like Tim, like, Albany's a small place, so everybody knows everybody. And Tim cornered them and said, I know you guys are a band, but would you be into your drummer drumming for us? Like he went to the singer to like try to recruit me,
Poach you.
Yeah, to poach me,
But in like a really polite way, though.
In a polite way. And at that time, we were just like a small band that, we were breaking up and changing members all the time anyway. So, Gus was like, sure. And Gus that was the singer. And he called me up and said, I think Tim said he wants to play in a band with you. And I got really excited. And then next thing I know, I got a call from him. And then Matt and Tim are at my house, and Matt comes in, and the first thing he does, because Matt is a very logistical guy, is he looks at my drum set. He comes in to look at my drum set and figure out, okay, how are we going to get his drum set over to the practice place? And, he measured my bass drums, and before I even played, with them, or talking about what we're going to do, he just wanted to make sure that, my drums would fit in his car and that we would get it.
I guess by then you had the smaller drum kit, or did you still have the double
No,
bass?
I still have a double bass drum, but I only used one bass drum,
Right.
I always wanted to use the double bass drum because Keith Moon used a double bass drum. But, when Keith Moon uses his double bass drums, it's only on fills, right?
Yeah.
And I had a double bass drum, but I kind of was like, I don't really need a double bass for what I'm playing. I mean, before, before Op Ivy, I was also in a metal. Speed metal was really big around in the Bay Area in like 84, 85, and 86. It was huge. That's, Metallica just came out, and and it was a big scene. So I tried to be in a metal band called Chronic Plague, and a speed metal band, right? But I couldn't play the double bass drum, like you need to in speed metal. So like they kind of kicked me out of that band. But then I was like, well, I really wanted to play punk, and I don't need to have double bass drum, and I don't need to be able to play. I mean, I can do most of those things with one foot.
Right.
and so, I just was like, I'm just going to play with a single bass drum and just kind of concentrate on that. And I think it made it easier for me, because I like putting a lot of, hi-hat accents with my left foot, and to be able to, to be moving that foot back and forth to a bass drum pedal was just like, I don't want to think about that. I'd rather just think about it on my hi-hat,
Yeah, I learned to do a lot of that stuff, from a lot of those Lookout bands. There's a lot of hi-hat accent stuff going, especially, like early Green Day.
Right.
I was really into when I was young, and Trey Cool does a lot of those little, like while he's playing, and that's something I adopted too. And I do that when I play in bands today. I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep that going. And
I used to
I think
do
it's such a cool thing. I don't hear it very much.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of that with my hi-hat and just kind of like putting it in. That's why some people would say, oh, you kind of sound like you're a jazz drummer. And I'll be like, well, I wish I was sounded like a jazz drummer. Can't go anywhere near that. But I do love jazz, and I listen to it, and I have a sense of, music ability of jazz, that because my dad was way into jazz music, and I grew up listening to it. And I can play it, but I just can't play it good, like a real good jazz drummer. But I use that. And I think it gives it like I say, a very loose flowing sound. Like I don't play like a tight, like maybe a Fat Records drummer sounding. I kind of let it kind of gave, that East, that's what, when people say like East Bay drummer sound, I think that, there's a few drummers from that scene that, I grew up with playing in Op Ivy, like, Aaron Comet Bus is one. And like you say, John from Green Day, or we used to call him El Saab, who he played, in the Socracy. He's another who kind of just like makes it kind of flow, and loose, and with, putting accents in different interesting places. I know definitely Aaron does that, where you can tell Aaron's playing because he doesn't sound like anybody else, right? And I think that one really cool thing about some drummers is they get their own style, and when you can like hear something, when you hear them play, you can say, oh my God, that's this guy playing. You might not even knew that he was in the band, but you can tell that he's playing because of a style, of a certain thing he does. Aaron totally does that.
He does it on his ride.
Yeah, he does on ride, and kind of, and his snare, the way sometimes he hits a little bit off the beat, and as a kind of a retard note,
Right.
and it's you can hear that. I feel like I also have my own kind of style where I use my flow, differently than most drummers, and don't stop and start at the same place, and I also tend to play a little bit ahead of the beat. I'm kind of push. I'm not a pocket drummer where I'm sitting in the pocket, playing pocket. I'm a little bit looser, but I'm kind of pushing forward a little bit more, and just a tiny bit of maybe a little bit in front of the beat. Just, like I don't use click tracks, and I've never been that kind of drummer. People.
Well, I'll go ahead and cross that one off my list of questions. But actually, dude, so before we get too far ahead of this, it was actually interesting that whole thing came up, because I have in my notes written here that and I get very like Matt and I are both a little on the ADHD side. I am freshly medicated, so I can focus in and actually have a purpose to use my
I'm
superpowers here.
non-medicated.
Right.
But I noticed that like your hi-hats were never clamped super tight. You always had like a little bit of a wash to them. And I always
Yeah.
was wondering if that was more, stylistic of a choice. But I mean, I knew myself growing up too, like there was a recording that we had that was kind of had these weird sounds in it because I had a chain on my wrist. So like
Right.
was it just the tension of the hi-hats, or was that an intentional thing that you would do?
Well,
Or?
you know what it is I try to play with it, right? I like it loose like that because I love the harsh especially when you're playing like hardcore drums, right? I love that where the it's not too open, but it's giving like like a chainsaw. I
Yeah.
love that sound. And then, I love the way that I can put accents into it. So sometimes, I'll be playing fast and I'll keep them open so that they barely touch each other. So it's like it gives it a different kind of texture to playing something fast, especially like in schlong, we used to go from one style to another style, right? And that what I found was that using the hi-hats to get a really abrasive sound when I want it to sound like a grindcore, I would use that and then can easily make it go into a jazzy or slow, very textured sound because we would jump from one style to the other. So I'd go really loud and then I can close that off and it goes from loud to soft. So you're using different textures, and I would use that. So I love to play around with exactly how I keep those, hi-hats open because the hi-hat is one thing that rings out and people hear. So, and it's on the high end of your set, right? So when you want it to sound hardcore, really play that hi-hat so it just makes a really loud sound, and it kind of like it gives it a texture. It gives what you're doing,
So it sounds like that was very intentional, which is awesome.
very intentional. I want that, and schlong, I really want to have my changes in styles very noticeable, right? So when you're using your hi-hat like that and you clamp it up and then it becomes very quiet,
Right.
I mean, I really like to play with, loud to quiet a lot. And I think that brings more mood to a music. It brings, it brings, it's more artistic, it just gives it more dimension when bands have control of going from soft to loud and maybe not necessarily slowing it down, but you playing fast and then you go quiet and you're playing just at the same tempo. You bring way more style than just like the same for the whole song,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry.
Go ahead, man. No,
I was
good.
just saying that the hi-hat is one of the few things on the kit, if you're playing punk, that you can really have that dynamic, aside from playing at the, like you said, at the same tempo, quieter, you can really change the feel of a song with you can't really do that on the hi-hat too much unless you just play kind of a different rhythm. But you hit I mean on the ride, but you hit the ride, it makes sound. The hi-hats, you can really control the feel of a song really well by opening and closing, and that's what I love about especially drummers who care about that, and obviously you do, and that's what makes some of these songs really great.
I feel like though on a lot of times, and you can control the dynamics, which is a great word because I love to play with dynamics on the kit, right? And I feel like even with the ride, if you hit the ride and you're playing that, and you want first, you just want like there's maybe a 2/4 fast hardcore part, and you're playing it, fast on the hi-hat and kind of close, so it's kind of chunky, right? And it's chunking along, and then you want to open it up, but you don't want to get it too loud. You play it on the ride like that, but play it with the stick where you're hitting or you can even play it on a crash, right? You're playing the same thing with a crash, so it's like, and it kind of rings it out, and you get this ringy, especially on the ride. Because I used to play this, I played like in Op Ivy and Schlong. I had the biggest ride. I had a 26-inch Zildjian jazz ride from the 40s, right? It was an old ride that I got when I bought the Rogers set too. And it was one of these really thick Zildjian cymbals that was never going to break. You could not break it. It was so thick, it was never going to break. And so I would use it kind of almost as to ring out when I wanted that kind of sound where it's like, because it would have a vibrating sound where it's like as the faster you play. And so if you can hit it with the side of your stick on the end of this big cymbal that I had, it would kind of go and have a kind of a ringing sound to it, and great for when you want to go fast. You don't want the chunkiness of the hi-hat necessarily, but you do want it to kind of ring out and it kind of like it has like its own sound, and it's really cool. It's like a vibrating sound. It's almost, if you have it mic'd, you probably don't want to do it to record, but live it would sound great.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask if you ever utilized that in the studio, that technique, or if it was more of a live thing. And you just said it was more of a live thing.
Yeah, it's more of a live thing because it would when I would do that in the studios, it would get feedback. Like there would be a ring, and people in the studio, what is that? What is that? And I would know that was my cymbal because I'm hitting it. And it kind of has this ringing, kind of like, when you lick the glass and you put your finger and go around, it gets that kind of humming. Well, when you play it fast, you would kind of get that ringing noise. Like,
I don't know if that's called a harmonic or what. I don't know what word that is.
Sometimes I do that. I do that to Matt's ears when he sleeps. I just come to his house and sorry.
Yeah. All the way from Texas to New York.
It's worth the drive, man.
Sometimes I don't know how you do that.
Anyways, back to being not super creepy. So I wanted to ask, dude, growing up, a couple of my buddies that I played with and drummers, we called it the mellow. So the boom, pop, 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 pop.
All right. Yeah.
What inspired that beat? Was that kind of something you pulled from another drummer, or did that just seem to work so well?
That kind of just felt like normal for a lot, and I still play that beat all the time today. And I also, because I was very much into surf drumming, I loved the Ventures growing up, and sometimes a lot of my friends would say that I sort of, my style is a lot like Mel Taylor, the drummer for the Ventures.
Yep.
And that 50s kind of surf style where I go bop 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 bop, and a lot of my rolls and stuff, especially on the snare drum, has like a lot of surf rhythms where I'm playing kind of like, I feel like a lot of surf music, that the drum style I just have always just sort of played naturally.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of that surf, that especially that bop 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 doom bop bop bop, that's definitely came from surf music. And
that's awesome. I still utilize that so much. Especially the more recent years, instead of going over on the chorus to the ride, I'm going more to my crash and kind of letting the snare take some of the work over and doing less with my foot, and then trying to work my left foot back into doing some notes too. So it's just funny, man, that those influences that happened. I mean, I was probably 12, 13 playing along those records. It's funny how like it can be literally 30 years later and you still find those things. Like they sort of get like encoded in your like drumming DNA. And I always just thought that was such an interesting thing of like,
yeah,
people are pulling from all sorts of different, like I was saying, like metalhead kid. Sepultura was the first concert I went to, and I just loved it. And I loved how they always worked like those Brazilian rhythms. And I still find myself doing
Yeah.
probably fills that I have no business trying to pull off, like working them into that stuff.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. I love like all world music and especially percussion, and we were talking about Brazilian music and maybe like cumbia, salsa, how like it's all on a drum. Drums are the main first thing that are written, and then everything else is kind of written around a rhythm and a beat, which all these rhythms come from Africa and then made their way around the world. And another, and Europe was polka is another something that I've always been influenced, right? Because that staccato polka beat. So you can take these beats, a polka beat, and just that oompa 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 doompa doompa doompa. It's very staccato and makes things very rigid and stiff, and yet very danceable. And it's in so much so many styles of music is kind of come from a polka. Polka isn't just people think of it, Germans drinking beer music, but
Weird Al.
music. Yeah, Weird Al, who
I'm
I'm a huge fan of Weird Al.
same.
So.
I'm a huge fan. So is my daughter.
Right. But like polka in general is kind of a style that comes from so many different parts of the world, and they use polka beat, like cumbia is a polka,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just different kinds of polkas. But it's that style, that oompa oompa oompa. You can say a lot of country music starts with a kind of a polka thing. You can even go into like oi, and some fast punk oi hardcore is really, if you can break it down, and if you really turn like a lot of these oi songs and you can turn them into a polka song very, very easily, because it has the same, all this comes from the same thing, the bass lines, the boom, 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 speed it up, da na 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 na. It becomes like, hardcore punk song.
Yep.
And so polka is, basic music, and so I love how like all these different styles of music, it's all part of all music. Punk rock, even though it seems like, we're breaking things down, we're making things sound ugly, and we're making things sound fast, we are still inspired by all these different styles of music and all from all around the world, and
Yep.
it's all shown in there in different ways, and so many bands use different styles, but in their own way.
Well, I started noticing too. It's funny, the amount, and maybe I'm wrong here, but the like the Latin influences in schlong seem to be
Yeah.
many, and it was funny too. Is listening to a lot of that stuff. I guess you were what I would consider like an accent drummer. Like you have a really interesting way of accenting the same beat most people would, but it's always seems to be like, it's when I would hit the snare, it seems like you're hitting the kick drum. And like, is that another one of those things that was kind of, I know that like Stuart Copeland would drop out, he'd put the kicks in some really weird place. So were those like very intentional things for you as well?
Well, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Stuart Copeland, and he's influenced my drumming a lot. But I still think that I try to listen to music. I listen to all kinds of music, and I've always been into world music, bands that play all kinds of styles and all this. So when it comes to like how I'm going to play a song, if I hear something Latin, I just play what, instead of trying to play the proper thing or learn exactly claves or, what I'm supposed to do for that. I just do it how I hear it in what goes from my head into my arms and my legs, right? It goes from and how I feel like this is supposed to sound, and then try to work that out instead of trying to play something proper and learning, exactly how to do it. I try to teach myself how to play like that. If I'm going to play, like even ska or anything, people will say, this is ska. I'll listen to bands, I'll listen to that, and I'll try to just figure it out myself instead of trying to do it proper way. What's the way? What does it sound like to me? What is it? What is this? How can I play what it sounds like? And a lot of times, that way I invent a whole different, original thing that isn't played like that, but it makes the point. It makes the point, and I think that's how I figure, things out. Because I don't, like playing jazz. It would take me forever to actually become a good jazz player, learn all those rudiments, study and study and study. And instead, I kind of just, fake it, fake it, do what I think how it sounds. And hopefully it comes across the point I'm trying to make,
Right.
I think it's really neat whenever, especially like in punk rock, when you hear an influence like that, like a Latin influence. I'm a big fan of Bill Stevenson of Descendants and all, and he would throw in those little Latin influences on his ride cymbal a lot, and it's just such a cool thing to hear because sometimes you don't really expect it. You're like, oh, it's loud punk rock music, and then all of a sudden you hear you hear this Latin beat going on, and you're like, wow, just adds a whole new dimension to the song.
Yeah. I feel like, it's a good thing to have to be able to appreciate all the different styles and not like limit yourself to not being able to do it. Like
Sure.
anything, if you think something sounds good, try it, if you're like, well, we're playing this, and I'm sick of playing this, straight up 2/4 and just doing it, the whole time. And we go into this little breakdown part and I'm only playing, I want to kind of change it around and do something, do it, change it,
Mm-hmm.
hear something. If you hear like this, this bass line that the bass player is playing kind of, has this like really funky groove. Let's like expand on that and chop it up a bit. Doesn't always have to be the same formula that every band plays. You can take something that's simple that you did and then expand it, change it, create, mold it. It's like a piece of clay, change it up. It doesn't always have to be the same thing. Every song doesn't always have to be the same.
For sure. Yeah.
Do you
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, which I always thought was, I had someone ask me this once and it kind of blew my mind. Like if you, and I'm not implying that I think you should do this. That's not it at all. But whether it be Op Ivy or Jew Driver or like, have you ever listened back to something even years after the fact and been like, oh, it would have been cool to do something different in that spot? Or do you just,
I think we all do that.
can you pinpoint like a certain song you think? Or?
Especially in Schlong. I listened to Schlong and like we did so many things, and sometimes we did a little bit too much, we would try to cram. There was like so many songs like where we would cram, 30 different parts, different styles in the 2 minutes.
That's like my favorite part of the band though. It was just absolute chaos. I love it.
But sometimes, I'll listen to that. I'll listen to those songs and we have so many and I'll hear a part and I go, oh my God, that part is golden. I really love. What if we would have just took that part and expanded on it?
Hindsight.
And made that one part into a song,
Yep.
I do that all the time. But it's okay, it's something you just have to, when you go in the studio, you just have to say, you know what, that last hit, that's it, because you are where you are at that time. And you may learn things over the years and evolve and look back and go, man, but you didn't know it then. So it's okay.
Oh yeah, and we were that band. We were just like you were talking about ADD. We were a definitely ADD band as a band. Like if one band had ADD, that would have been us because we would get bored of a part and we were like, okay, let's change it now before we can. Then we would change. We keep on changing. But the thing is, like we would remember these changes. It's like we could change. We would be playing like and we would remember those. I think it was more like, well, we can do this and we're remembering these things. So let's stick to it.
Yeah, I think normally that would be a detriment to a band, but you guys embraced it.
Dude, I played in a hardcore punk band. Actually, it was funny. Is it like the longest running band I was ever in? I was a vocalist, but there was a local band called Endicott, and they always blew me away because they never played the same. There was never a chorus. There was never a verse. The whole song would never repeat a part. And I just remember watching the drummer. We're still good friends. And it's just like, how did you remember? Maybe he was a little bit more sober than I was at that. There's no way I would have been able to like remember all those parts. Like it's definitely impressive that you could make all those changes and remember them. So
well, we would play this game like, and a lot of times we would remember these parts and we would, because we play this game like, can you follow me? Right. And I played since, the bass player for Slaughter was my brother. So we definitely had like a connection, right? Where we knew when each other was going to change. But I was sort of like the guy that I would initiate the changes and I would go, can you put a riff to, if I play something completely different, can you do it just like that? Spontaneous, And so we would do that. Let's go. And we'd just start jamming. I'd play like, I would play like, start with a 4/4 hardcore thing. And then on the 3, like I'd always do it on the off time. So I'd be playing like, and then when I go I just change and I go and see if, and they would watch my eyes because like I'm very facial kind of drummer. So when I'm playing, I'm playing like this, my eyes, as soon as I'm about to change, my eyes would like bug out, and I go, and then they would know when my eyes bugged out that I'm changing then, and so we would have this thing where, okay, I'm changing. Can you read my mind? Can we all change and do the same thing? And more than not, it was like the times that we would change, that would stick, and we would say, oh my God, okay, let's do this. So then we would work on that. We go, that worked really well. So we would have that game, and then we would just sort of, these things would like kind of just get put together where all of a sudden, we have a 3-minute song, but it has a million different parts because we were working on it, and because we kind of play this game, it's like, can you follow me? It would all just sort of stick. And and then, once we had it done, we'd also play the game as like, who can end the song first, So now we're playing it like, who could get through this? Who could get through all those changes the fastest? And then we play that game. So
you certainly have the most interesting way of writing songs that I've ever heard.
Well, I mean, I grew up, my brother and I are 18 months apart. So I grew up drumming and him playing bass too. So we've had that. Any band I've ever been in with him, like we'll write a song, we'll play it from beginning to end, and everyone else in the band will be like, oh, you've been practicing without us. But it's like, you developed that. That's awesome to hear the similarities of, growing up playing with your brother too.
It's cool. It's something that you can't explain, right? You have this thing with your brother, like sometimes, like a couple of shows, me and my brother during Schlong, we booked this show, and then the guitar player would just flake out, and it would be me and my brother at this show we were going to play. So we would call ourselves Spew-Ins because we really liked this 2-piece drum and bass band from Japan called the Ruins, right? And they were very, experimental, just changes all over the place. So we would go in and play these shows without having any songs. we would go, okay, this is an improv, and we would play like we would just do noise shit like rah, and then we would change, and we would just change at the same time, and he'd play like a funky thing, or he'd play like a jazzy thing, and we would go in, and then we would go really just to grindcore and go rah, and we would do this without ever writing a song and play a whole show.
That's that's awesome. That's so great. So I just I got two more questions that pertain to Op Ivy, and then I would have like some stuff about Schlong too. Did the ska punk like label, was that something that kind of came later, and did it ever like kind of annoy you? Because what I picked up on later, and I think I can't remember his name, the dude from In Defense of Ska pointed it out, that there's like really no songs that are ska and punk together. I think Officer may have been the only one that has like, but I don't even know if I'd consider it like that driven punk rock. Like, did that ever kind of get under your skin a little, or?
Well, I never really noticed it, but Tim did. Last time I was talking with Tim, he totally told that to me. He said, well, you have to realize that all the ska songs that we wrote, or that he came up with, most of them, the riffs and stuff, he was like, the ska songs were ska, and then the punk songs were punk, and Officer was the only one that we kind of combined. I mean, at points I thought that maybe Yelling in My Ear was kind of punkish, because it had
Right.
that, yelling in my ear, and it has definitely punk, most of these ska songs definitely have some, punk rock things about it, especially lyrically wise, and how we're just yelling the chorus and stuff like that can be punk, very punk. I think, Here We Go Again, even though it goes into a slow kind of rap thing, is very punk, kind of just like how he sings it kind of brings out that punk. So I definitely can see the combination of ska punk, but we didn't combine them as a ska punk thing. We always thought we're playing ska, and then we're playing ska songs, and we're playing punk songs.
Right. It's funny how like a lot of bands that manage to blend these, like Rage Against the Machine. I'm not like a huge fan. I have no malice, but I feel like they kind of dodged that label of like the rap rock. They didn't get lumped in with Korn and Limp Bizkit. And I think that like if you can blend it right, it just becomes its own thing. And then, going back and listening to, I'm not going to name names, but a lot of those bands it was like you played a ska verse, and then the chorus was punk, and then back to ska and back to punk. And I guess I couldn't believe it that it never dawned on me in all that time that it wasn't a mixture like that, and it fucking blew my mind. It was really strange to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of bands after us, that did the ska punk thing, like the Voodoos and the Voodoo Glow Skulls, and kind of combined that, the harshness, and then would go 2/4. They did it great. A lot of these bands did it right, and maybe I think we influenced a lot of bands on that style, but I don't think we showed them, this is how they weren't playing how we played it,
Yeah.
And so I think we influenced that, definitely influenced that. There were some, there were maybe a couple bands that were, ska punk. I could say like Culture Shock, the guys from Subhumans.
Yep.
They were doing a ska and a punk thing kind of. And there was, I mean, even Fishbone, had that punk thing and ska thing going, and soul and funk and all those mixtures of things going.
What a voice. What a fucking voice, Angela. Man, I think I can belt out some notes, but yeah, it's funny when you think back on things. It's crazy. So if you don't mind talking a little bit about like the years sort of between like the timeline, I guess, between Op Ivy to Schlong, and how that sort of transition happened.
Right. Yeah, no. So like I said, my brother was in Schlong, but he was also, a bass player. 'Cause like I said earlier, we played in punk bands in high school, and always had, close knit friends with my brother and all his school friends, and we still hung out during Operation Ivy. I still hanging out with people that went to my school. One of them was Gavin, who ended up being the guitar player for Schlong. And he was, in bands. And what happened was when Operation Ivy broke up, at first, we started, Tim and Matt wanted us to play in the band Downfall. And they wanted my brother to be in the band because my brother was like the roadie, the main roadie in Op Ivy. And he was like family, and they all loved him. And they knew he was a bass player, but, because Matt was going to play bass, he just picked up the guitar.
I mean, is Matt really that good anyways? Sorry.
But yeah, no. But I mean, nobody's going to take the bass away from Matt, right? Unless he wants to play rockabilly on the guitar, which he is a great rockabilly guitar player. But my brother just started playing rhythm guitar, for Downfall. And Downfall was more of, like we said before, like punk songs. And then, but the ska we were playing was slower. So like that beat for Take Warning, Take Warning, that kind of tempo. We had and kind of heavy ska, but slower. We didn't have too many fast ska songs in Downfall. We had like a few of that slower tempo, reggae, ska, kind of heavy mixture. And then we had punk songs. And that band, while it was going on, I was, hanging out with Gavin and a bunch of his friends, and they had another band that they were playing, and I was kind of playing percussion in this band. And I was just playing like toms, and I had like a keg, an empty keg that I would play on, and a timbali and stuff. And it was very heavy percussionist kind of just like, it was very much that, this is 1990. So that whole, like you were saying, the whole funk, kind of Primus, funk, Berkeley. There's a bunch of bands that kind of had that, funky thing going. And I was playing in a band sort of like that. It just was like heavy, kind of metalish sounding, but not metal. And I was playing percussion, and it was, kind of funky going. And I was just doing it as a favor for them and playing in Downfall. Well, my brother and Gavin started writing just like funny punk songs, really weird stuff. And they wanted me to play drums. So as that band, the funk band, kind of fell apart, we got a practice pad, and we just started playing. And that was before we had it named it Schlong, and we were just playing, kind of jamming the same time that Downfall was going. And then it just like, because me and my brother and Gavin is such a great musician, like one of the best musicians I've ever played with. He can play anything in the world. You give him an instrument, he'll learn how to play it. He knows he's just one of those guys that just very natural, a natural musician, And so we could give him ideas, and he'd be able to do all this stuff. So it just like gelled. And even though I'm playing Downfall, there's a lot of things going on that when I'm playing with my brother and Gavin, it was just like we were so just best friends. And I got that feeling that this is something, I mean, we might not ever, people might never like us. And, it took us like 2 years for Gilman to even let us play there. And, and it was very weird. It just gelled so much, and we were able to like create music that, I thought was original, and
yes,
nobody had heard. So I was like, oh, I think we should just stick to this. So that's when I kind of quit Downfall. They were on their way out anyway. After I quit, they played maybe a couple more shows, I think 2 shows after I left. And then Matt joined MDC for a tour in Europe. And then they just sort of dispersed. So that's how Downfall stopped. And then, so I just kind of concentrated on Schlong, and And Schlong was a band where those were my two best friends, was a band that we practiced every day. We had a, practice pad and was practice every day. And because we wanted to, and we had so many songs. And when we finally started getting shows, like in 91, we started really playing a lot of shows, and we did a 7-inch and went on tour. It was just like, okay, this is my life now, playing in this band. We never made any money from any of this, but we did so many things. And like, pretty much through the 90s, we actually started in end of 89, and from like 1990 all the way to 98, for 8 years, we did like so much. We toured, like, we would go on, 2-3 months tours of the US tours. And we did that like 10 times. And then we went to Japan. We did a lot, and we put out a lot of records. And we were just a band that we were able to come up with projects. Everything was like, we came up with the craziest ideas. Early on, like I said, Gavin could just learn songs and do this. We came up with projects like, doing the whole Fleetwood Mac Rumors album on a 7-inch. We did that and called it Tumors, right? And we learned it, and it was like every song was like the Fleetwood Mac song, but like done in 45 seconds a minute, and really we had so many different projects like that. And like we did the West Side Story and called it the Punk Side Story. And Gavin was just someone we would give him ideas, and then he was able to create and do that. The three of us wanted to go on tour in 93 without our electric instruments, so that we could like go camping and have more room in our van. So we decided that we wanted to start a bluegrass kind of band, and we called it Three Finger Spread. And I play guitar. And so we gave what we did was Gavin bought a banjo, and then we gave him the Journey box set and locked him in his room for 5 hours. And then after playing to Journey box set, he came in, he could play banjo like that. He could play every single Journey song on the banjo.
That's insane.
So then we went on tour, and we just wrote a bunch of songs and we went on a Three Finger Spread tour without booking any shows. We're going to go across the country, and we went across the country, played bluegrass music. And what we do is we find out a show, and we try to jump on it. We found out Jawbreaker was playing the same time across country. So we found out about the Jawbreaker shows, and we busted in on their shows, and they let us play their shows while they're setting their equipment up. We would play opening up for Jawbreaker just while they're playing.
That's awesome.
Like for a bunch of shows, and it was cool. And then we would go to like Central Park and just busk.
Yeah, busking is so fun. I've done that before.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, we made more money busking than we did playing at clubs.
Yeah.
I guess it's more personal.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's funny is the parallels I think that a lot of us share, where my brother's the same way, like bass, guitar, anything. I remember we were probably in our mid to late 20s. He calls me. I'm a tattoo artist by trade, so I'm with the client. Phone keeps ringing. I finally pick it up. I'm like, what do you want? He's like, you got to come over. I bought a banjo. It's noon. He's drunk as shit. And I'm like, I'll call you later. I showed up to his house at 7:00 at night. Now he's sober, and he's playing Generator on a banjo by Bad Religion. So not only did he figure it out, the same thing where it's like, now you figure this instrument out, and you're already working on like Paradise City and like all this crazy stuff. And I think I think that's what always kind of continued my bit of a like drummer syndrome, where I'm like, no, fucking come on, man. Like I try to do any of that stuff, and it just doesn't work quite as well. But that's awesome, man.
I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Are you still doing your stick company? I noticed that you had Stick
That's a,
company, two-tone drumsticks.
yeah, that wasn't my company. I got sponsored by them, but that was a,
Oh, okay. I,
it's a
I read
very
it wrong.
interesting, it's an interesting story. Um, there, it was this kid who was a pro skater from Bulgaria, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he started his own stick company called Two Tone. And really, it was just this. He would get these sticks and send them up to this, um, up in the Bulgarian hills to this old man who would make these sticks on this lathe, right? And and what happened was he got in touch with me and asked me if he wanted to sponsor, and I was like, yeah. So I sent him my autograph, and he made Dave Mello sticks. And I was going on tour in Europe with this anarcho band called the Pawns, right? It was like an anarchy kind of uh, hardcore punk band called Pawns, meaning power and wealth need slaves. And and we and I was just filling in for them for this 3 month tour of Europe. And we got and I was able through this guy who sponsored me to get a show in Bulgaria, two shows in Bulgaria. And we went there, and he took us while we go there. He took us up to the mountains to meet this guy who made the sticks, right? And we're going up into the mountains in our van, and there's like, horse buggy. I mean, all the streets are like dirt, and it's just horse and buggy going all the way up there. And then I meet this old man, and he's making these sticks on this little lathe, individually, and
Right.
he made all the sticks for them. So yeah, I had my own stick from that guy for about, I don't know, it was a couple years maybe, and I got a bunch of sticks, but I don't think it lasted long. I still
What
have a
what
couple.
year was that?
This was like 2006 and 2007, I think.
Did you keep any as
Yeah, I have a
mementos?
few. I did.
Awesome.
I did.
Yeah, those some of those need to go on display.
Yeah, no, it
That's
was
a
a
cool
great
story.
adventure.
That was a good one, Mac. Fucking, all right, that's cool, man. So yeah, I mean, we've had you for about an hour and a half now. I don't know if you're in a huge rush to get out. I would be a bit remiss if we didn't talk about Jew Driver at all.
Yeah, let's talk. G Driver is actually a band I play guitar in.
Yep.
Play guitar and sing, and there's Jew Driver came around in, I think, about 2002. We had this stupid idea of making a band that kind of mocks the band Screwdriver, right? Screwdriver is an 80s skinhead Nazi band, white power band that started in the Nationalists in the early 80s, late 70s, I think they started. And they weren't around for very long, but the lead singer died. And anyway, it was a band that Nazi skinheads are very proud of, and an easy band for us to parody. So we do, we take the Screwdriver songs, and then we turn them into Jew Driver songs, which, like, we would, like, there's one song called "In Case of My Pride," talking about white pride, and we turned it into pastrami on rye. We like to
Dude.
and then there is another song, one of their more popular songs is "Hail the New Dawn," right? Hail the New Dawn. The white people are going to take over the world, so hail the new dawn. And we turned it into "Hail the Jew Gong," and "Hail the Jew Gong" about Richard Barris, who is the TV game show host for the Gong Show. He was a Jew, right? So, he's this big conspiracy Gong Show guy, and so we kind of named it "Hail the Jew Gong" after him, and then we ended up doing a bunch of parodies of Jew Driver songs, but their songs are all like the same chords and kind of kind of get, boring after a while to do that. So I started writing original Jew Driver songs, just kind of mocking the Jewish temperament. And, because our singer is funny, I kind of see him as like an old man complaining a lot, that typical Jew guy complaining about the back and how expensive things are and all this kind of stuff. So we kind of take on this persona of, these complaining Jews. And I wrote a bunch of songs, punk songs about that. And that's what Jew Driver is. And we still get together and play to this day. I mean, I live in Montana. They're all in the Bay. So when we get together, we still
that's just one of those things that I don't know how I stumbled across it as a kid, but oh my God, what better way to fight hatred than with hilarity? It really it works so well, man. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing that story. That was great. But yeah, man, I mean, we're at about an hour and a half now.
Cool.
So everyone feel good about that?
Yeah.
Was,
Do you have
so much fun.
Do you have your segment that you do in these interviews?
How could I forget? So
this is what we usually end with.
We've been closing it out with questions from my kids.
Okay.
So
I need to start doing this too.
My 7-year-old wants to know if you'd ever get gum in your hair.
I have.
These are the hard hitting questions that you're gonna have to answer.
Yeah, no, I got gum in my hair, especially when I used to have long curly hair. So you see the pictures of me on the back of the Op Ivy record, and I a couple times, I don't know how I got it. I was like chewing gum back, my late teens and stuff, and like sometimes things just go places, man. And I would get gum stuck in my hair all the time, and I'd have to cut it out. Yeah, I actually once on tour, an Operation Ivy tour too, I got me and Jesse at the same time. We put friggin' toilet paper in our ears for, earplugs, and it got so stuffed in our ears that we both had to go to the ER to get them taken out because we could not get the toilet paper out of our ears.
Wow.
And then my 10 so my 13-year-old, I ask her all the time, but she's too cool. And my 11-year-old wants to know if you still have all of your fingers. I don't know why, but
I do have all my fingers. The bass player in Jew Driver, though, has like a half of a finger. He chopped off during school at wood shop. He cut like the tip of his finger off. So he has like a half of a finger, but I have all my fingers.
I just think it's so funny that these are like the most ludicrous questions, but so far everyone has had like a pretty close, relatable answer.
I have gotten gum in my hair. Here's a story.
I haven't unfortunately had hair in about 10 years. So.
Same.
Dude, I remember when I was 13 and I was playing drums, I got gum all over. I think maybe I got too stoned or something. I was stoned and I was chewing gum and I got them all over my drumsticks while I was playing. And the gum was like wrapped around and sticking. I remember that very clearly.
Man, I love the stories. Dave, would you, in the future, would you be coming back for a part 2?
Yeah, dude,
kind of telling some more stories. And I know that you had mentioned the possibility of maybe doing like a little quick thing from your studio and actually being able to play through some stuff would be, if you'd be willing to do that, man, I'm sure people would absolutely love that. So
yeah, awesome. I bet we could do it through Zoom. I bet it would sound decent.
Yeah, just examples. Maybe you want to see how I play something, or little tweaks that I do, or experiments or whatnot.
Sure. People would absolutely love it. And then, is there anything, projects, upcoming stuff that you want to?
Well, I was playing in a band called Kicker, and that was a lot of fun. If anybody wants to check them out, so just a kind of a punk rock, Subhumans-ish kind of band from the Bay Area with an English singer, and we had a lot of fun. I'm on one of their albums, and check that out. It's called Pure Dribble, and by Kicker. And then that was maybe we recorded that in 2018, 17 or 18. So that wasn't that long ago, even though it was a long time ago for younger people. But for me,
Right.
like 8 years ago, that was just yesterday.
It really
But and right now I still do a project with Gavin from Schlong, called 80s Night with a K, like 80s Night, but like
Dude, you just have the best names for everything.
And really what we do is we play like 80s songs, or we do we play covers, but we just like punk them out and play them punk. But Gavin plays he made, one of those bass guitars where it's like he made a guitar but has 2 bass strings on top and then 4 guitar strings on bottom. Has 2 different pickups, both going into 2 different amps. So he plays the bass and the guitar at the same time.
Oh, the bass guitar.
Yeah, it's like a bass guitar. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
it's a good taste.
Yeah, I think Chris from President of the United States plays a bass guitar, right?
I think
sounds so like interesting.
So he can play the bass. He plays bass lines and the guitar lines at the same time.
Yeah.
And then we just sort of punk out really funny stuff like Hall and Oates songs and and then like we once did a bunch of yacht rock. We played for my 50th birthday, and like all our friends have the same birthdays around the same time, and we all had our 50th birthday on a ferry boat around the bay. And 80s Night, we learned a bunch of yacht rock songs and just played like a bunch of, yacht rock, but totally punked out all these yacht rock songs on this boat for our 50th birthday. And we do stuff like that.
Now, is there anywhere to find this stuff?
We're working on it.
Good. I want to hear.
We definitely have some stuff on YouTube, us playing live. Like last year I went to New Orleans and we played a few shows, and we did a little tour not too long ago. And we keep talking we have all these ideas that we want to do. We've come up with millions of stupid ideas all the time. So we always say, let's do this and let's do this. He lives in New Orleans, or he lives in Alabama and New Orleans, both. But and I live here. So when we get together, we are still a band, and we still try to, we can like get together and practice 1 or 2 days, and we're ready to play a show. We're kind of like that.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool.
Well, I do have to say, man, it's so cool. Just like, I mean, this many years into it, and you still seem just as excited about punk rock. I feel like so many people kind of fall out of it or get like bitter or jaded, and it's just so fucking awesome to see you still like this.
Yeah, I love
still staying busy. So
I love it. Yeah, and I have some friends. I've been playing music around in Montana as well. I have some friends. We have a band that's going to play a show soon, and we also just jam. Sometimes we just like to play. Like we'll just get together and just play songs. Like I was saying, I love surf music. We get together and try to learn surf songs, and just to keep busy and keep playing, and hang out. And it's a good thing to do with friends, right?
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, all right, Dave. Well, we'll let you go, man. And again, thank you so much for your time. This has been really cool. I love hearing all the stories. So
right on, man.
Yeah, hopefully we'll do part 2 sometime soon.
Fuck yeah. Thanks for inviting me. And I had a great time. All right.
We'll talk to you soon, man. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.